Some people live so lavishly, even without kids.
It's tough to make a living, especially when you're not even having kids.
I want a child too. Yet my husband, my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law are relentless, oblivious to my desperation and sadness. My husband looks at me as if he's disappointed. I can't help but blame myself for not being able to conceive. My name is Emily. I'm a 35-year-old homemaker. My husband is also 35 and works a corporate job. We've been married for 5 years and have been unable to have kids. This has been a burden on me for a long time.
Emily, still no kids?
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's getting late. While your father-in-law is still the head doctor, we need our grandkids to be doctors. We have our needs too.
3 months into our marriage, my mother-in-law first said this to me. Ever since her words became routine, and I've been stressing and blaming myself. My husband's parents run a hospital. His father is the head doctor, and his sister is the deputy. It's a fairly large hospital. As the eldest son, my husband wanted to be a doctor too. However, he couldn't get into med school due to poor grades. He seems to insist that our child must become a doctor and inherit the hospital.
Until you're 35.
What are you talking about?
You have until you're 35 to have a kid. That's the deal.
But it's not something that can be achieved just by trying. My husband, like my mother-in-law, set a deadline, which makes me anxious.
Our future child must be a doctor. Otherwise, there's no benefit for me.
According to my husband, his sister will inevitably take over once his dad retires. Then our child will become a doctor and take the seat of the third-generation head doctor. That's the plan. Truth is, his sister has a daughter in middle school who excels in studies and dreams of becoming a doctor like her mom. My father-in-law adores her. So there's already a candidate to inherit the hospital. Although it's not like there's no successors, my husband seems to have different thoughts. If this continues, his sister will become the second-generation head doctor. But he cannot stand the thought of letting her daughter inherit after that. And agreeing with him is my mother-in-law. She adores my husband and feels sorry that he couldn't become a doctor. That's why she keeps nagging me to have a child soon. He couldn't become a doctor due to his lack of aptitude. Holding on to that dream for their grandchild seems misguided. Amid these conflicting intentions, I ended up being suspected of infertility 2 years into our marriage and had to see a specialist. Since my father-in-law's hospital didn't offer the service, my sister-in-law introduced me to a friend who's a doctor. Upon returning from my first consultation, my mother-in-law immediately called. "What's the issue? Do you have some sort of defect?" I was stunned by her bluntness, but reminded myself that she's always straightforward, and answered, "No, they didn't say it was a flaw, but stress could be a factor. They recommend taking it easy." Then, from the other side of the phone, I hear my father-in-law shouting,
"Bring those test results here now."
So quit your job and laze around the house all day. What stress could you possibly have?
"I'm sorry." I had to listen to my mother-in-law's lectures for a while longer before hanging up. At that moment, I didn't realize I'd have to go through many more conversations like this. My struggle with not being able to conceive started affecting my husband, too. He began finding faults in everything I did.
"So you've been home all day, just watching TV?"
"I've been doing chores."
"Really? Then why is there so much dust everywhere?"
He snapped, wiping surfaces to show me the dust. "All right, I might have missed a few spots. I'll be more careful."
"What's your problem? I'm providing for you, aren't I?"
My husband's irritation escalated quickly, and I usually chose to stay silent to avoid fights. Then he leaned in and said,
"Just hurry up and have a baby,"
before storming off. Life at home was growing more and more strained. While facing the ongoing pressure to have children from my husband and mother-in-law, I started wondering if the problem might actually be with him. Not that I was suspicious, but if I'm healthy, it's reasonable to consider whether he might be the issue. However, both he and my mother-in-law dismissed the idea outright. One day, I mustered the courage to discuss it with him. "Don't you think we should get checked? I don't seem to have any issues. What about you?"
"What are you implying? That I'm the reason we can't have kids?"
"I'm not accusing you of anything. But if it's an issue, we need to treat it, right?"
"You're joking. There's no way I'm the problem."
He stormed off, furious. I tried bringing it up in different ways, asking him to consider testing. But he was stuck on blaming me. I couldn't push it further, and the problem remained unresolved. Then, a shocking event unfolded. I found out my husband was cheating. He was coming home late every day, looking uneasy and restless. I had suspicions, but didn't plan on gathering evidence. At that point, love might have already been missing from our relationship. One day my husband and I visited his parents' house. As always, I felt overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's nagging about having kids and my father-in-law's comments suggesting we should check for fertility issues. Then, my husband dropped a bombshell.
You know, I might have a kid with someone else. If that happens, I won't need you.
His mother chimed in.
At this point, I don't care who has David's child. Anyone will do.
They both laughed, uproariously. I felt my patience nearing its end. Time passed aimlessly as my husband continued his affairs with his mother's approval. Then I got a message from my sister-in-law saying she was in the area. We met up at a local cafe, and she had surprising advice for me. Emily, why not go back to work?
I'd love to, but you know they'd be against it.
You haven't been able to have kids even as a homemaker. Plus, you have a nursing degree, so why not use it? I always found great fulfillment in my work as a nurse. My sister-in-law had watched me suffer quietly and said that enough was enough with my in-laws. You're becoming their stress ball, she said, pushing me to talk to my husband about returning to my nursing job. However, he flat out refused.
What if you get pregnant? You'll just quit, causing trouble for everyone,
he argued, making it sound like my only job was to bear children. I snapped back. What about you? You haven't even checked if you're the issue, blaming everything on me.
Shut up. It's all your fault.
5 years into the marriage, my love for my husband had utterly evaporated. When we got divorced, my mother-in-law said,
You wasted 5 years of our lives. You couldn't even give us a grandchild.
I stood my ground. Are you sure it's all my fault? David never took any tests. I looked her straight in the eye and declared, I will have a child. 2 years have passed since then. I returned to my nursing career and threw myself into my work to forget those painful 5 years of marriage. I'm currently working at a specialized clinic for women with fertility issues, the very same place my sister-in-law introduced me to when I was married. I currently work at a fertility clinic, the same one my sister-in-law introduced me to when I was struggling with fertility. Life had finally settled down, and I decided to catch up with my high school friends via email. I had a friend returning from overseas work in New York, so we all agreed to meet up. I wasn't exactly free to move around, but neither were my friends, so I took the lead in planning a get-together that wouldn't be a burden for anyone. Thanks to my supportive family, I managed to make it to the restaurant we agreed upon, despite the busy preparations. In a private room at the restaurant, we all had a great time catching up and reminiscing. After a while, I excused myself saying, I'll be right back, and left the room. The restaurant was bustling, filled with lively conversations. Among the chatter, it was easy to pick out a familiar voice. Long time no see, I said, approaching a table for 7. All eyes at the table turned toward me. Among them was a face that couldn't hide its surprise.
What are you doing here?
My ex-husband David looked at the twins I was holding, and his face turned to one of shock. His parents, sitting across from him, were equally shocked. Yes, I had remarried after divorcing David, and was now a mother of twins.
What's the meaning of this? Interrupting our meal? How rude!
My former sister-in-law, sitting next to my former mother-in-law, continued eating as if nothing had happened. I told you during the divorce, didn't I? I wanted to show you my adorable babies.
Did you now?
Don't play dumb. I was bullied for being the wife who couldn't get pregnant by both David and you.
That's a baseless accusation.
Really? You said it was my fault. You said it was all my fault for not being able to have kids. Yet you never even got yourself tested. David averted his eyes and clenched his fists on the table. And you threatened to have a child with someone else. Your mother even said it didn't matter who gave birth, remember? As I said this, a few of my friends approached and said, David, long time no see. We've heard a lot from Emily. You've changed a lot since high school, haven't you? David and I were high school classmates. So the friends I was meeting today were also his classmates. The ones looking stunned were a modest-looking woman sitting next to my ex-husband, and people who seemed to be his parents. I'm sorry for interrupting. Were you announcing your marriage? If so, let me give you some advice as your senior in this household. My ex-husband and his mother looked shocked and tried to stop me. Ignoring them, I raised my voice and said to the woman, "Can you have kids? If you don't have them soon, you'll be bullied by these two, you know?" The woman looked instantly uneasy and exchanged glances with her parents. Then my former sister-in-law, who had been quietly eating, spoke up. "If you're worried, you should back out. What she said is true. It's embarrassing, but that's how our family is."
"What are you talking about, sis?"
"You're not after Emily's child, are you? You're after Dad's position as the hospital director, right?" "Let's talk about that later." "Who says the director has to be a doctor? I'm stepping down, so go ahead." With that, she placed her napkin on the table and said, "I've been invited by a friend who's a doctor. Why don't you come to our fertility clinic?" Everyone was speechless at her words. Yes, my former sister-in-law had always supported me behind the scenes. She had always felt uncomfortable with how her parents ran the hospital, their attitude towards patients, and my brother's ambitions. She even helped me with this revenge. She was the one who told me about the restaurant and my ex-husband's pre-wedding meeting. Unable to take it anymore, my ex-husband's girlfriend left the scene with her parents. My ex-husband tried to chase after her and smooth things over, but was yelled at by her father, collapsed on the spot, and started crying. Seeing this, my former mother-in-law also started crying, and my father-in-law couldn't stop shaking. Afterward, my former sister-in-law officially resigned from my ex-father-in-law's hospital. She came to work as a doctor at the fertility clinic where I work. After she left, the number of patients at my father-in-law's hospital plummeted, partly because she was well-liked and partly because of the restaurant incident. My ex-husband quit his job and tried to turn the business around, but apparently it was pointless. With my former sister-in-law, who was the deputy director, gone, and my ex-husband's engagement broken off, the future of the hospital looked bleak. It's only a matter of time before it changes hands. As for my ex-husband, he seems to be spending his days tormented by emptiness, having lost both his girlfriend and his job, and watching the declining hospital with his parents. As for me, I'm living the happiest life, busy with my twin babies, and still able to work in my calling as a nurse, alongside my husband, who's also a nurse.